The fourth of these biomarkers is immune tolerance. And I'm in favor of tolerance, and I'm against intolerance. And I hope you'll join me. And lymphocyte response assays are the way to go because they're functional and they give you all the information you need as opposed to confusing information and less than you need. So just to review very quickly, the immune system is about defense, repair, and deletion. So we have to defend against foreign invaders, that's generally during the day. Then we have repair, that's during restorative sleep at night, and we have to eliminate the abnormal cells so that we don't get cancer. The innate immune system is your first line, and when it's healthy, you don't need more than that. So the first line innate immune system is these are the microbiomes of your skin, nose, mouth, lungs, GI tract, wherever. You want to eliminate the foreign invaders before they get in, or neutralize them if they do get in. And yes, there's an adaptive immune system. That's your backup immune system, really important. Because when you have a healthy immune defense and repair system, there are no allergies. There's no inflammation. There's no chronic illness. Your innate immune system is recycling any wear and tear debris. Anything foreign comes in. At night, you get through the repair zone. And I would share with you, and I find this often helpful to explain to patients, we have 50 billion of these innate cells at any moment. And each of those 50 billion, when we give them the antioxidants and minerals and cofactors they need, can engulf and recycle 50 foreign invaders. So we can recycle 2.5 trillion infectious particles or food remnants when our innate immune system is working properly. But less than 1 in 50 people, less than 2% of the population, has a healthy innate immune system. And most people have called in the reserves. And the reserves are the adaptive or delayed immune mechanisms. But here, history completely fails. It can be 3 hours to 3 weeks from the time you get exposed until the delayed reaction occurs. These can be Schwartzman reactions, serum sickness reactions, Arthus reactions, very well described in the conventional literature. But if it's 3 hours to 3 weeks from exposure to symptoms, you could have the perfect history in the world and you still wouldn't be able to get back to the information. So history doesn't give you delayed allergic information. These are the people whose get up and go has gotten up and gone and they need to find it again. This is what we do in the laboratory to look at the lymphocytes on the left, non-reaction, on the right, reaction. Can you see the difference? I hope you can. One of the things that people sometimes say about our test is that it's very advanced, but it's very hard to read. Notice I told you that on blind split samples, we have reproducibility of less than 3%. Most lab tests are 15 to 20%. Most immunology tests are 20 to 30%, and that's the best the lab can do. But I realized unless we could have a very high precision on blind split samples, we wouldn't be able to apply the information to individuals. And we want to apply the information to the individual and say to them, substitute for this, take these supplements, eat the foods you can digest, assimilate, and eliminate, take these mental and physical actions to evoke healing responses and remove obstacles to recovery. So what we're measuring is not the immediate histaminic reactions, but yes, all of the harmful antibodies of any kind, and the immune complexes, and the T cell responses. And it turns out the type 4 T cell responses, like Th1 and Th2, are even more important than the antibodies with regard to delayed allergy. So if you want to know about T cells and immune complexes and B cells, and I hope you do, then you need a lymphocyte response assay. And we offer the lymphocyte response assay, LRA by ELISA Act, because it's ex vivo. So it is comprehensive, it is functional, but we're also observing the reaction just as it happens in the body. And yes, there are immediate allergies, the type 1, the things that RAS and skin testing can detect. These are the Ishizaka reagin. This is the IgE histaminic system. That's how you get at that. For that, frankly, history is usually good enough. But for the delayed reactions, the type 2, 3, and 4, is this a helpful antibody or a harmful antibody? Your lymphocytes tell you. Is this an immune complex? And what does that mean? Your immune system tells you. The lymphocytes tell you. Is this a T cell reaction? Your lymphocytes tell you. So we set out to do an ex vivo lymphocyte cell culture more precisely than most physical chemistry, because that's what you as a clinician would need to make sense out of delayed allergy. We can now do over 500 cell cultures on an ounce of blood. We have the largest numbers of foods, medications, environmental chemicals. We can even look at hypersensitivity to toxic metals, and so forth. So we're the most comprehensive lab. We're the most complete lab because we look at all the pathways. And we're the most reliable because of the precision of split samples. We've been at this now 75,000 plus cases. We've been at this long enough to have done over 22, 23 million cell cultures. We also standardized a health assessment questionnaire, an HAQ, a health assessment questionnaire, because the cell culture gives us a lot of information, but if the client will give us 15 minutes of information and answer these validated questions, we can now give you a comprehensive forward plan for the next 6 months in terms of what to eat and what to substitute, what supplements to take, what mental and physical activities to remove obstacles to recovery and evoke healing responses.
You're saying that your test is measuring IgE, IgG, T-cell reaction, immune complex?
Well, let me say it because it was almost right. T cells, yes. Immune complexes, yes. IgM, IgA, IgG, yes, but not IgE, not type 1, not histaminic reactions. You get that by history, rest, or skin prick. Right. So we do measure all the antibodies that are harmful, like IgA, M, and G, and the immune complexes and the T cells in one mixed cell culture.
So there's other labs that say they're measuring IgG response.
Well, there are labs that measure IgG using physical chemistry. They use serology. They quantify antibodies, and then they give you information about that.
By exposing the serum to the...
Serum. Notice not plasma, not cell-rich plasma, but serum. It's old-fashioned physical chemistry and serology. It has a fatal flaw. The fatal flaw is this. You can't, well, no, first of all, you can't tell whether it's a good or a bad antibody. Is it a helpful neutralizing antibody? Is it a harmful complement-fixing antibody? You can't tell. And then you're looking at serum, so you miss the T cells. Well, it turns out the T cells are the most important part of delayed allergy. So we give you all three pathways in a functional way, and we really do want you to understand the difference between this functional ex vivo cell culture and even the most sophisticated of the serology antibody IgG type of tests. Joy in Living the Alkaline Way is a guide that puts this information in perspective. This is an example of the Joy in Living the Alkaline Way. And we've been evolving this document over decades. We find that professionals very often can use this as a take-home so that the client can purchase this from you, or you can download copies of this online, and then you can emphasize which pages you want them to pay particular attention to, because you can look for dairy-free eating in here, or egg-free eating here, or grain-free eating here, etc. And you can get into the mind-body things like relaxation response and active meditation and green dichromatic light and so forth. So this is an example of the kind of information-rich but still engaging for consumers. And this is written for a consumer audience. This is not going to give people a PhD in molecular biology, but we do find very often that people are quite grateful for the clarity and the reinforcement that they're able to get from that. So in addition to the personalized report, we're then able to look at the 75% of the immune system that often lines the gut. When I was a young doctor, we were told that Peyer's patches were vestigial, which meant we didn't know what they did, and therefore they didn't do anything. Now we know that half of your immune system, or maybe 3/4 of it, lines the GI tract, so very important. Now we get to a self-assessment, one of the important self-assessments, and we often start with these simple self-assessments. So let's say that we had the person check their morning urine pH, we had the person check their C-cleanse ascorbate need, and then we say, how long does it take for you to digest and eliminate your food? How long does it take? We know what's healthy, 12 to 18 hours. We know what's typical, which is 3 to 7 days. So we often have people who say, well, look, I go to the bathroom and eliminate something every day. And I say, fine, is this from yesterday or last week? And why is that important? Well, if you have a long transit time, you're going to be reabsorbing toxic matter. And what if you have a hypermotility, so you have enough toxicity or enteropathy that you get the food out in less than 12 hours, which means you don't have time to digest it and assimilate it. So we pay a lot of attention to the quality of digestion. We pay a lot of attention to these issues of transit time, and we ask people to do something like this, take charcoal capsules and mark the time. And then when the black crumbly stuff comes out of your tush, mark the time. And the difference in hours is your transit time.
Can you expand on kind of your take on pathogens and candida, changing the environment versus attacking pathogens? And
Love to.
Kind of, story of transit time
Right.
affects.
No, I'd love to. And notice that everything I have said has been about evoking healing responses and removing obstacles to recovery. Nothing that I've said is about fighting with an infectious organism. And let's talk about just what Sean was asking. What about candida? Well, yeast will grow if there's partially digested food remnants in the colon. And when you have a healthy transit time, and when you're eating foods you can digest, assimilate, and eliminate, candida goes away. Now let me give you the 3 reasons why I don't treat candida. If you treat the organism, you will select the most resistant form of that organism, and it will come back. And going all the way back to Billy Crook, who was one of the fathers of anti-candidal programs, and he really intended well, he was a very fine guy. But if you want to fight with infections, I predict you will end up cyclically fighting from one infection to another because you haven't appreciated the host hospitality issue. And when you have a healthy transit time, you cannot have candida overgrowth in your gut. So we, quote, manage candida without treating candida. And we manage it by having a healthy transit time and having people eat foods that they can digest, assimilate, and eliminate without burden. And now let's talk about Giardia, a parasite that might hide in the biliary tree, or Cryptosporidia, and name whatever pathogen you're most concerned about, Blastocystis hominis, which, by the way, was Dean Ziert's favorite parasite. And it's so common that for a long time we were told it was commensal. But she showed that it wasn't. She and I actually developed a parasite detection test using zinc sulfate flotation. Because the problem with parasites is it's hard to find them. But if you can concentrate and float them up while the schmutz and debris spins down, you have a much more effective way of detecting parasites. And so I was a parasitologist at one point. We now know that we have been profoundly wrong in that we have been fighting with infections when we should have been promoting host resilience. We can talk about the Lyme's organisms. We can talk about any category. They are all markers of host hospitality, and they all, 100%, go away, resolve, stop, all of them. When? The redox potential, when there's enough ascorbate so you have a healthy redox potential. When you have enough magnesium in the cell so that the proton gradient allows the cell to recharge its energy. when you have the cofactors that get the schmutz out of the mitochondria, because we're marinating in all of these chemicals that disrupt our hormones or disrupt our repair or disrupt our batteries. And so from my point of view, the reason we need so many more supplements and protective molecules today is actually pretty predictable and obvious, because we're in the 21st century where these things continue to geometrically rise. Essentially, everything that I eat now is either homegrown or organic or biodynamic. And yet, I'm not totally sure, but I believe I get a little bit of glyphosate, the thing that's in most of the GMO grains, from time to time. And by the way, if you haven't looked at Stephanie Sennett's work, by all means look at that work on why you don't want glyphosate. But among many, many other things that it does that harm, glyphosate inhibits magnesium uptake. So one of the essential minerals that we need to protect us from the 21st century is competitively inhibited by the very molecule we don't want in the first place. Isn't that fascinating? I hope it is fascinating.
So actually, one quick
Yeah.
question. So some of the complex gut testing, you prefer this kind of more simplified method, but it's a better way to determine post-hospitality as a way of understanding whether someone's going to have infections.
Yes,
pathogens.
yes. Let me try to be clear. If you treat the pathogens, you will continue indefinitely to treat one pathogen after another, and eventually the person will get sicker, not better. Why? Two things have been overlooked. How come the immune defense and repair system isn't able to recycle that infection? And a lot of what I've been saying today is how to get the immune defense and repair system to start recycling anything foreign. And then the other side. What are the consequences of the treatment? I remember, not too many years ago, when doctors who used nystatin against Candida were confident that it stayed in the gut. So we looked in the urine and we saw nystatin crystals in the urine, and so we figured, they don't stay in the gut. It took 10 years before my colleagues were willing to accept the fact that nystatin does get absorbed. Then there's ketoconazole, but it turns out that interferes with your hormones and messes up your adrenals. I don't think that's a good trade-off. But most importantly, you end up selecting the most resistant organism, and then something comes back because you overlooked the reason why they got sick in the first place. A lack of something they needed or too much of something they didn't. And that may sound too simplistic, but when you get into the elegance of that simplicity, it's simply elegant and elegantly simple. When you have enough of what you need to live in harmony with your nature, you are protected from the exposures. And I can tell you from personal experience that I have been in many places where essentially everyone else in our group got sick, and I got exposed to the same things they did, and I didn't. And what was the difference? Well, to some large extent, I believe it's these supplements, which I happen to put out, but these are what I travel with right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Actually, it's 12. Because I gave one away to Stan Krippner last night, and for some reason the vitamin D isn't. But I did want you to know that I live this way. This is not just something I preach. This is not just something that puts shoes on my kids. I want to share with you what we have experienced and get you as excited as I am about this kind of really functional, really integrative, really personalized care. So we want to substitute for things that react and harm the immune system. We want to correct nutritional deficits. We want to evoke healing responses, and we want to enhance detoxification competence. If you can't get the schmutz out and you don't bring the good stuff in, I predict, as Karnak the Magnificent, I predict trouble. Now, which trouble? Well, I don't know. Tell me which toxins and tell me which deficits. Fortunately, and I think this is reasonably defensible. Fortunately, today, we do know what's essential. We do know the things that you can not make on your own, you have to take in from the outside. And some of them are conditional. If you're super healthy, you don't need glutamine because you recycle it so well. But if you have any GI issues, leaky gut or repair deficit or long transit time or enteropathy or, then you definitely need the glutamine, and preferably in the recycled form, because you've got years to decades of cumulative repair deficit. We've done studies, fibromyalgia. I don't really want to labor this except to say to you what I headlined before, which is we actually put these programs into clinical trial practice, and we have the most successful long-term outcome study in fibromyalgia. In just 6 months, we showed 50% less pain, 70% less depression, 50% more energy, and 30% less stiffness. And the folks that have continued to follow through have generally remained healthier, spending less money than they were before, but with a better quality of life. And that was published in the Journal of Musculoskeletal Pain. This is some of the data that came out of that study. This is the global data. We normalized everything to 100% to start. At 3 months, the midpoint, all 3 groups were doing better. But at 6 months, you can see the placebo group is now back to baseline, whereas the experimental group's primary fibromyalgia here is just fibromyalgia. Secondary means you have complications with fibromyalgia and other immunopathies. But notice that 6 months, a lot of things look good for 2 weeks. A lot of things look good for 10 or 12 weeks. Don't stop there. Take it out to 6 months or more to see real results. That's the kind of studies that we do in regard to the diabetes. Diabetes is a classic autoimmune disease. We did 2 studies, type 1 and type 2. They both were significant. We saw reduction of hemoglobin A1C by more than 1% in both populations. And in the type 2, in the acquired diabetics, 18% reduction in insulin, which means less insulin resistance. These are some of the results from the type 1 and type 2 diabetes study. You see that delayed allergies play a role in many cases. There are some similarities. Toxic metals are more likely to be reactive in type 1 than type 2 diabetics. Additives the same way. Cow dairy the other way around. Type 2 diabetics much more likely than type 1 to be cow reactive. Now, we are not in the school that says cow dairy causes asthma and tomatoes cause arthritis, etc. However, associations do hold, and the real determinant is the immune defense and repair system. If your immune defense and repair system sees nightshade foods as burdensome, substitute for them. If your immune system sees corn or grains or cow dairy as reactive, substitute for it. So we get personal and individual, where most folks are categorical, and they say, everybody should have no wheat, or everybody should have no cow dairy. Now, I can see the logic of that, but it's fatally flawed. And the flaw is that you're overlooking other causes of delayed burden, so you're not correcting that, and you're presuming that the golden arrow or the laser shot is sufficient. Now, here's where I agree. I agree that hard-to-digest foods are hard to digest for people who have weak digestion. And what are the hard-to-digest foods? Grains, cow dairy, and meat. So I often say to people, for the next 3 months, you can have all the grasses you want, you can have all the fruits and vegetables and herbs and seeds and so forth, but you have a weak digestion, and so aside from immune reactors, I'd like you to take in foods that are easy to digest. So no cow dairy, you can have sheep and goat, no meat, a modified vegetarian diet, and let's see where we are in 3 to 6 months. And we have improved outcomes so dramatically in that way that it really has become the core of what we do. Remove obstacles to recovery, evoke healing responses.